Have you ever been just a step away from doing something you know will change everything, but suddenly it's like some invisible force stops you? You freeze, procrastinate, come up with excuses, and the worst part is, you know you're sabotaging yourself. If this sounds familiar, then this video is for you. The truth is, the hardest battle isn't against the outside world, but against ourselves. Machiavelli, a master at understanding power dynamics, knew that victory comes from recognizing the opponent. And when that opponent is within you, you need a smart strategy to defeat it. We often hear about self-sabotage, but identifying it in our own lives is a whole different story. How many times have you put off doing something important because it wasn't the right time or because it wasn't perfect? That's the first big challenge, realizing that, more often than not, we are the ones creating the obstacles. Recognizing this isn't easy. Self-sabotage disguises itself as excuses, procrastination, or fear of failure. When you finally realize that this pattern keeps repeating, when you avoid opportunities or delay crucial decisions, it's like a light turns on. Suddenly, it becomes clear that the biggest roadblock is inside you. It's like being in a race and, instead of moving forward, you're setting traps in your own path. What holds you back isn't what's outside, but the internal barriers you build. And here comes the first step, accepting that this self-sabotage is real. Only then can we start thinking about how to overcome it. Recognizing the problem already gives you a strategic advantage, as Machiavelli would say. This is your first victory. Machiavelli taught us that in life, there are two main forces at play, virtù and fortuna. Virtù is the ability to make things happen, what we can control, shape, and influence. Fortuna, on the other hand, is the unpredictable chance, the things that are completely out of our hands. And understanding this dynamic can be a powerful key to dealing with self-sabotage. We often get frustrated over things we can't control, and that's when the paralysis sets in, the feeling of being stuck. But in reality, what's missing is focusing on what's within our reach, on our virtù. Instead of wasting energy trying to change what's out of our control, why not focus our efforts on what we can actually do? Think about everyday life. There's a lot that happens outside your control: unexpected work, issues, an unforeseen situation with someone close, or even changes that come out of nowhere. These are the forces of fortuna. But how you deal with them, how you react and adapt, is what defines your progress. By stopping the fight against the uncontrollable, you gain power over your own life. This doesn't mean ignoring problems, but choosing where to put your energy. Machiavelli makes it clear that while fortuna may affect our paths, it doesn't define who we are. Our ability to act, to adapt, and to seek alternatives, that's virtù. And by mastering this art, you begin to take back control, making more conscious choices, avoiding being swept away by mere chance. Making decisions is always a challenge, especially when we get stuck in that pursuit of perfection. How many times have you felt paralyzed because you wanted everything to be flawless? The problem is that this search for an ideal often prevents you from making any decision at all. And here's an important point. Being realistic is often the best strategy. Machiavelli would say that in the real world, waiting for perfection is pointless. Life is full of uncertainties, and by trying to control every detail, we end up doing nothing. Sometimes, the best decision isn't the perfect one, but the one that's possible. It's the decision you can make with the information you have at the moment, knowing there are no guarantees. Perfection paralyzes, while realism moves you forward. This idea of accepting good enough doesn't mean you're settling for less. On the contrary, it means you're being smart by recognizing that reality rarely matches the ideal. And you know what's ironic? When you stop trying to be perfect, things flow better. The fear of making mistakes lessens, and you gain the freedom to act and adjust your course along the way. Difficult decisions require courage, and this courage comes from accepting that the world won't align perfectly with your plans. What Machiavelli teaches us is that acting based on what's available and not on what would be ideal is the best way to make progress. Because, in the end, life doesn't expect you to do everything perfectly, but to keep moving forward. The fear of failure is one of the most paralyzing forces there is. Who hasn't hesitated out of fear that things might not work out? Sometimes, the fear of failing keeps us from even trying. But what if, instead of being controlled by this fear, you could use it to your advantage? Machiavelli gives us an interesting perspective on this when he talks about whether it's better to be loved or feared. And when we apply this idea to our personal lives, the answer can be surprising. It's not about being feared by others, but about being feared by yourself. This means that, instead of running away from failure, you face it head-on as something that shouldn't paralyze you but should motivate you. When you fear disappointing yourself, you start acting with more focus and determination. Failure stops being an invisible monster that you avoid at all costs and becomes a challenge to overcome. Imagine a situation where you're facing a great opportunity, but the fear of making a mistake is holding you back. What Machiavelli teaches us is that the power lies in knowing how to control that fear, not letting it control you. Being feared in your own life is a metaphor for taking charge of the situation, deciding that the fear of failure will push you forward instead of pulling you back. The truth is, failure is part of the process. It will happen sooner or later. The question is, what will you do when it comes? If you learn to face it with the right mindset, like a modern Machiavelli, you'll realize that fear can become one of your greatest allies. If there's one thing we learn over time, it's that nothing in life is guaranteed. Everything is constantly changing: plans, expectations, even the people around us. Dealing with this uncertainty is an ongoing challenge. Machiavelli was a master at understanding that the ability to adapt is what truly separates those who manage to overcome difficulties from those who remain paralyzed. He saw life as a series of unpredictable events where success was directly tied to the ability to change course when necessary. You know that moment when everything feels like it's slipping out of your control. In those times, what matters most isn't sticking to the original plan, but adjusting your sails to the new winds. Those who learn to adapt not only survive, but thrive. This lesson is invaluable in everyday life. How many times have you found yourself insisting on something that just wasn't working, simply because you didn't want to change direction? Uncertainty is part of life, and there's no point in fighting against it. What Machiavelli shows us is that strength lies in accepting what cannot be predicted and, instead of resisting, adapting to it. Adapting doesn't mean giving up on your goals, but finding new ways to achieve them. When you adjust your expectations and your actions, you become better prepared to handle the twists and turns that life throws at you. Just as Machiavelli teaches us to be strategists, we also need to become masters of adaptation. Perfectionism might seem, at first glance, like a good quality. After all, who doesn't want everything to be done in the best way possible? But what many people don't realize is that perfectionism can become a silent enemy. The pursuit of perfection often becomes the biggest obstacle to progress. Machiavelli, with his pragmatic outlook, would probably say that perfection is the enemy of good, and he would be right. In practice, perfectionism paralyzes you. It traps you in the smallest details, delaying important decisions and actions. In the end, instead of moving forward, you find yourself stuck. This obsession with the ideal creates a trap. The more you strive for perfection, the further you get from accomplishing anything. The reality is that, often, good enough is enough to move you forward. By accepting that not everything needs to be perfect, you create space for continuous progress. Instead of being fixated on a detail that isn't exactly as you wanted, you learn to move ahead with what you've got. And the most interesting part is that, over time, good enough can turn into something excellent, precisely because you didn't let the fear of imperfection stop you. Machiavelli reminds us that the world is imperfect, and therefore, waiting for perfection is a waste of time. Accepting good enough is not about settling. It's an intelligent strategy for dealing with the flow of life. In the end, what matters is moving forward, not staying stuck, waiting for everything to be flawless. We always hear that being honest with yourself is the best path. And most of the time that's true. But sometimes a little lie can be the push you need to move forward. Machiavelli, who understood the complexities of the human mind like few others, would show us that self-sabotage can be tackled with an interesting strategy: consciously deceiving yourself. It sounds contradictory, but let's think about it. How many times have you found yourself believing that you're not capable of achieving something? These thoughts can be devastating, eroding your confidence and your drive to take action. But what if, for a moment, you decided to lie to yourself, telling yourself that you are fully capable, even when the evidence suggests otherwise? This strategy, which Machiavelli might approve of, has support in scientific psychology, specifically in Albert Bandura's self-efficacy theory. Bandura asserts that the belief in your own ability to complete a task is one of the key factors that determine success. Even if that belief isn't entirely true at first, it creates the necessary momentum for you to take action. And over time, that belief strengthens. By feeding yourself a sense of competence, you enhance your ability to face challenges, turning that initial lie into a real stimulus for success. In practical terms, this means that deceiving yourself for a brief moment, telling yourself you're capable, even with internal doubts, might be the key to overcoming self-sabotage. Machiavelli would understand this strategy as a way of manipulating your own mind in your favor, using your beliefs to generate action. And once that movement begins, the self-deception loses its significance, giving way to confidence built through practice. At the end of the day, what Machiavelli teaches us is that sometimes being strategically dishonest with yourself is what helps you win. You don't always have to face the brutal truth head-on. Instead, you can temporarily mold it to achieve the result you want. Once the wheel starts turning, self-sabotage loses its power. If there's one thing Machiavelli understood well, it was the value of persistence in an unpredictable world. He knew that to survive and thrive, you had to resist adversity, adapt to circumstances, and above all, not give up. This is a concept that can transform how we face the challenges of modern life. The idea that true success doesn't come from a single stroke of luck, but from the ability to hold steady, even in the face of setbacks. Resilience, from a psychological standpoint, is the ability to recover and grow after difficult situations. And it's precisely this ability that Machiavelli exalts when he talks about the political game of life. He understood that life is a series of ups and downs, and those who can get back up after a fall are the ones who, in the end, have the best chances of success. Machiavelli teaches us that persistence is more than just sticking with something. It's about adapting, adjusting strategies, and continuing to move forward, even when the outlook doesn't seem promising. This mindset is crucial in overcoming self-sabotage. How many times have you thought about giving up because things didn't go as planned? That's when you need to dig deep inside yourself to find the strength to persist. It's in this ability to endure and adapt that the key to overcoming difficulties lies. Persistence also involves a dose of realism. It's not about blindly insisting on something that no longer makes sense, but rather adjusting your expectations and methods as you move forward. And this is where Machiavelli offers us a powerful insight. Those who can adapt to adverse circumstances while keeping their focus on the goal are the ones who ultimately achieve victory.